Hi, my name is Dave Allen. I'm chair of the Unite the Union Regional Disabled Members Committee, and proud to be, in some people's eyes, a moron, because I believe that you can and will be the next leader of the Labour Party in Britain and the next Prime Minister in 2020. My question, Jeremy, is about disabled people's rights at work. What would a Labour government under your leadership do to protect disabled people at work, to encourage them into work, to support them to getting jobs in the first place, and if they are unable to work, to give them a decent life to live in a decent Britain? Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any more hands? Yes, over the other side of the room, the man in the blue polo shirt there.
Good afternoon, Jeremy. I'm part of a trade union movement in Teesside. We've been having protests ourselves in Teesside for the last 20 weeks over the abuse of migrant labour and companies abusing our national agreement and undercutting, right? I'd just like to ask you, if you do get the leadership, what your views would be to help the trade union and for people like ourselves who are fighting back.
Thank you. Right, any more hands? Yes, this lady at the front in the red shirt.
Maggie G. I'm not a member of your party. I was turned off the Labour Party by Tony Blair and his cohorts that are still in control. What I would like to ask is that you carry forward to your compadres in Parliament that whilst we would have preferred you to be in power after this last election, you are in fact in opposition, and it is your job to oppose and not abstain, because if you're not for it, you're against it.
Sorry, was there a question at all, or?
Yeah, will you take that message to Parliament from us here? And I think I speak for a lot of people.
Right. Jeremy, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks for those questions. First point on disabled, thank you for that. There's a number of things that have happened, all of which have been bad. One was the closure of employee factories. The other one is the loss of support mechanisms. The third is the loss of advice. And another is the way in which the Independent Living Fund has been passed over to local government without any ring fencing of it, which means that in most cases it's going to disappear altogether. There is also a question of the way in which return to availability for work tests are carried out, and I mentioned that in my own contribution. So a number of issues here. One is to absolutely enforce the Disability Discrimination Act, and I would want to see the Equalities Commission either being much bigger or having separate sections of it that deal specifically with specific areas of discrimination. I also think that there should be public support for people to work if they're able to, and public support for them to be employed, and a requirement on employers to provide the necessary facilities and conditions for them. I also think the Remploy factories are a good idea. The whole Remploy system actually did provide a lot of opportunities of work for people and should be reintroduced or expanded. The other area is one of mental health and the disabilities that go with that. We as a society still actually don't treat mental health with the seriousness it deserves. We still use it often as a term of abuse, and we allow far too many people to suffer in silence or end up on medication when actually what they needed initially was talking therapies that they couldn't get. And I would love us to be a civilized enough society that we could be like one Scandinavian country where their Prime Minister announced that he was suffering from severe depression and was given 6 months leave in order to recover and come back and continue being Prime Minister. Could that happen in Britain? I mean, seriously, could it happen in Britain? I'd be very, very surprised. And so a comprehensive process. But it also means on dealing with all these issues, there has to be proper representation. I've been talking with DPAC, Disabled People Against the Cuts, a great deal, about not just the issues that they face, but also the way in which they're represented within our society and within our party. There has to be decision-making in the health service, in local government, in Parliament, in our party, that involves people who have disabilities, that involves the needs of people with disabilities, and also ensures that they have an equal chance with everybody else to become councillors, to become MPs, and to be represented. It's about inclusion in our society rather than exclusion within our society. And so, in the case of education, I generally go along with the idea of inclusive education so that all children with disabilities go to a mainstream school, and the mainstream school gets the funding necessary to support that individual pupil. It's good for them, it's good for the other pupils as well, and it's good for our society as a whole. And so, thanks for your points, thanks for your question, and thanks for the work that you do in representing your members in that area. The second question, I was talking with colleagues in Unite when I was coming here this afternoon about a dispute that's going on at the present time, where a multinational building contractor is employing people from other countries on much lower wages than we paid in this country, deliberately undermining the trade union agreements that have been reached in this country, and grossly and grotesquely exploiting those individuals and preventing other qualified individuals from working in that kind of industry. It's wrong on every single count what is going on there, and I admire and support what Unite are trying to do and the other unions are trying to do to ensure that collective agreements across the whole industry are enforced, that the right of everyone to join a trade union is available, and that we have a wages inspectorate worth its salt that will ensure there is no undercutting, not just of the national minimum wage, but also of collective agreements across industries. As collective bargaining has diminished over the past years, we're now down to only 11% of the UK workforce covered by collective bargaining agreements. In this election campaign, we put forward a number of suggestions on rights at work, essentially those drafted on behalf of a number of unions by John Hendy QC about the automatic right of everyone to join a trade union, the right of everyone to be covered by a collective bargaining agreement across a whole industry, and a powerful inspectorate, not just in health and safety, but also in wage rates and gender pay and all those other issues. Non-intervention by government, lax laws, allows for employers to exploit the most vulnerable people, destroy the living chances of everybody else, and actually create a very dangerous and nasty atmosphere in our society. It's only trade unions working together and trade union members working together that bring about justice at the workplace and will bring about decent levels of pay for those people. So I support the campaign the union's doing, and I want to see collective bargaining brought back across all industries. Engineering industry, but in this case particularly the construction industry. And if we don't do that, then we end up in effect with lots of people in competition with each other, and that competition leads to a race to the bottom rather than a race to the top. And just the last point I'd make is that Unite and other unions have changed quite a lot in the way that they work, with community membership, with taking into membership self-employed people and others. Because just because you're self-employed, you can still be exploited, you can still be undercut, you can still be underpaid, you can still be very badly treated. Surely it's about our views on the collective, about the cohesion and cohesiveness of our society. So well done, the campaign that's being mounted at the moment, and let's develop that policy so that we bring about real protection for all workers, wherever they come from, wherever they work. It's workers together that achieve strength and unity. Last point from the front. You didn't mention it, but I guessed you were talking about the Welfare Reform Bill. The Welfare Reform Bill is an abominable piece of legislation that is designed to punish the very poorest and cut government expenditures, as I said in my contribution, also subsidise low wages and high rents. I voted against it. I think every Labour MP ought to vote against it, and I think in opposition we should join in with every other opposition party and vote against this bill in all its terms. And I also think that we should suggest to a number of Tory MPs, that might be an easy suggestion to make, that when the days when the crucial votes come up, wouldn't it be so much better if they just took a day off and went to the races or somewhere else and just didn't bother to show, so that we can, the rest of us that are serious about our politics, can actually defeat this piece of legislation. But it's not just one law and one piece of legislation. It's about the attitude we take as a society. Because I don't know if any of you follow the rather vague utterances of the Prime Minister at times. If you do, you will notice that about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he made some comments about how much better it would be if everybody had individual insurance. Very interesting, that. Why on earth does he think the Labour movement from the 1850s onwards wanted a national insurance system? Why does he think New Zealand was the first country in the world to bring in national insurance? The idea was you all make a contribution. Employer and worker make a contribution, and from that you get a national insurance fund from which you're all protected. It's not complicated, it's quite simple. It's collective, and you pay according to your ability to pay. Collective. He wants an individual insurance system, and I'm sure for him it would work really well. I'm sure he'd be absolutely fine. It wouldn't be any problem for him whatsoever. But if you're somebody on minimum wage, on a 0 hours contract, in a call centre or a takeaway cafe, I'm not quite sure how much real disposable income you've got to spare to pay into the National Insurance Fund. And of course, if you're on low wages or unemployed, your NI contributions get credited. That's probably what David Cameron finds so offensive. This bill is a Trojan horse for the next stage, which is about the destruction of the whole principle of the welfare state. That's why I make such a very strong deal about that line in the sand. The line in the sand for the Labour Party that we will not cross. We will defend the principle of a universal welfare state that works for all.
Right, can we have...
Is discrimination against the left?
Okay, can we have some hands up then? Well, yes, you sir in the grey shirt.
Thank you. My name is Malcolm Cowdery. I'm a retired teacher, one-time NUT representative at my school and in this area. And I'd like to ask Jeremy if he could outline the situation as far as he's concerned to do with TTPI. TTPI is a sinister and secretive set of negotiations going on that few people seem to know much about. Even politically astute people don't seem to have any idea what on earth it's all about. My concern is as a grandfather. I've got 4 grandchildren, and I don't want to see them suffer in the future if this sinister piece of legislation goes through. So I'd like to hear from yourself. I mean, I feel it's absolutely wonderful that we've finally got a voice in the Labour Party that it actually speaks of socialism.
Thank you very much. Any other hands? Yes, in the black shirt with the grey beard there.
Popular style. My name's Ian Jeffrey, Redcar CLP, and in the interest of equity, I'd like to ask Jeremy a question that I asked at the meeting yesterday with one of the other leadership candidates, and it was in a packed meeting of 56 people in St Mary's Centre. And the question is, instead of sending in the sniffer dogs and the barbed wire, shouldn't we be welcoming the 3,000 refugees at Calais and offer them a home?
Some more hands up. I'm just conscious that we haven't picked anyone on the balcony. Perhaps, yes, right at the front, the lady with a hand up. Yep. Oh, it's okay, we're bringing you a microphone. Let's be sure.
We've been hearing quite a lot from your colleagues in the House about their underhanded, undemocratic plans to undermine your leadership should you be elected. My question is, should your fellow MPs not be duty-bound to unite behind you if that's what the majority of your party members want, or does the wish of the electorate count for nothing?
Yeah, thank you. Jeremy?
Okay, thanks very much for those questions. Malcolm, thanks very much for your question. I apologise, I didn't include a reference to it in my contribution, please forgive me. Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, hands up those who have heard of it. Wow! Best informed audience in Britain, well done, take a bow. Normally it's about a quarter, so well done. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is being secretly negotiated between the USA and the European Union, and it is its core is something called investor protection. And so what it says is that if a company, say some nice friendly multinational like Monsanto, for example, or somebody like that, or Rakel or somebody like that, decided to invest in Britain, and a progressive British Labour government decided that there had to be, for example, a share option for employees, or there had to be workers' representation at major decision-making, there had to be planning agreements or something like that, in which the company would lose its unbridled control over what it was doing. They would say their investment was at risk. And therefore, they're trying to introduce a set of trade regulations across both sides of the Atlantic, which are a threat to public services because they're supposed to be in competition with the private sector. So the NHS would be at risk. Many, many other public services would be at risk. The right of a government to take any services, such as railways, into public ownership would be at risk. And the companies concerned could then take a national government to an investor protection court. Now, it is claimed that the NHS is exempt from this. I do not believe that to be the case. It is claimed that the cultural industries are exempt from this. I'm not confident that that is the case. What I am very confident of is that it is trying to reduce both sides of the Atlantic to the lowest common denominator on welfare provision, health service, labour rights, environmental standards, working condition standards, and everything else. And the question, why is it being negotiated in secret? Parliamentarians on either side of the Atlantic are not allowed to see the documents, not allowed to know what is being discussed, and we're going to be presented with some big thing in 2019, which we're all supposed to accept. And David Cameron says it will create, I can't remember if it's 1 million, 10 million, or 1 billion jobs, and create some, phenomenal numbers of wealth, numbers of pounds of wealth for the whole country. I've no idea where he gets these figures from because the agreement hasn't yet been made, so you kind of wonder about that. And then you ask yourself the question, is it really possible a government could be taken to court by a private company? Yeah, it is. The Australian government, no left-wing government, no way would they call themselves left-wing, Tony Abbott and his mates, no way. They're being taken to court by Philip Morris over plain packaging of cigarettes. Many other governments have been taken to court. The government of Tanzania was taken to court over some vulture fund that bought up some of its debt. And after the debt write-off took place through heavily indebted poor countries program, they then took the government of Tanzania to court for not paying them an exorbitant rate of interest that had gone on for 20 years that this vulture fund had bought. And so it goes on. And so I think we've got to be extremely wary of this whole TTIP process, work with the unions in the USA, in Canada and Mexico on the other side of the Atlantic, as well as unions in Europe to protect jobs and protect conditions, and oppose this. I'm not against trade agreements. I think trade agreements are necessary and are a good thing. But you can put conditions on them. Conditions about human rights, conditions about reducing the level of poverty in a society, conditions about improving education. You can put a lot of good, progressive conditions on. You don't have to enfranchise and empower the already unaccountable global corporations. That is what I believe is fundamentally behind TTIP. Two other questions. Thanks for the question about the refugees in Calais. I made the point which I make again. It's absolutely appalling the language that's been used against them. The numbers involved of people that are living in those camps is not that great. They're desperate people. Britain and every other European country should take its share and provide some place of safety for those people. They are desperate people that are fleeing from wars, some of which we were involved in promoting, such as the war in Iraq. And we have to have a different approach to foreign policy that doesn't just ignore the consequence of war and those huge refugee flows that are happening all over the Middle East at the present time. You won't solve humanitarian crises by electric fences and barbed wire. You solve them by looking at the causes of those crises over a much longer period and helping those desperate people. At the end of the Second World War, every European country all around the world did its best to deal with the then refugee crisis. The refugee crisis is back in a different and sadly even bigger form. It does require every government to put its head to the wheel and help with this, put its shoulder to the wheel and help with this, but also to ensure that UN does as much as it can as well and properly fund the UN agencies to support those people. Let's not use the language of abuse. Let's use the language of concern for fellow human beings that are suffering at the present time. The last point is on the language that's gone on in this election. Yeah, the Parliamentary Labour Party does hold the keys to the door in a leadership election. 35 MPs have to nominate, and we did better than that. We got 36. I think one came in by email or something like that, and we did it with lots of time to spare. There was nearly 2 minutes between the last one going in and the close of nominations, and I'm very grateful to them for that. Yes, there are members of the Parliamentary Labour Party that are not happy and don't agree. I wish they would read what's being said, and I wish also they would recognise that this is the most open, democratic, inclusive process the Labour Party has ever been engaged in our recorded history. And 600,000 people taking part in this election. And I do pay tribute to the Labour Party staff that are trying to deal with these massive numbers of applications and get them through. And I'm assured the ballot papers will arrive in good time for everybody. It's good. But it's also, the Parliamentary Labour Party must remember two things. One, it's very important, and it's a great privilege to be a member of Parliament. We're only members of Parliament because people voted for us to be there, and the Labour Party members moved might and main to get us elected there. And secondly, that the Parliamentary Labour Party is not the entirety of the Labour Party. We are part of the Labour movement. And whilst there have been things said by some people, I think you should also be aware that nothing has been said by a very large number of Labour MPs. And whatever the result of this election, we've got to be there to oppose what the Tories are doing, not just in Parliament, but outside Parliament. We've got to motivate the people of this country to recognise there is a different way of doing things than poverty, austerity and inequality. There is a different and much better way of doing things, and we have got to be in a position to offer that different and better way of doing things. This is a summer of great engagement, great enthusiasm, great hopes and great optimism. Let's carry it on after September. Let's carry it on so we really do change this country in a way that it needs changing for the better and for the good of the entirety of our community. People working together are optimistic and happy. People working in isolation from each other become isolated, obviously, and also start tending to move into the blame culture. Let's not go into that. Let's be a coherent, cohesive society that stands up for all, whatever their ethnicity, whatever their religion, whatever their position, whatever their age. That is the kind of good society that I think all of us in this hall want to live in. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone in Middlesbrough. It's been a great occasion. We are doing these events all over the country. We've got a big one tonight in Newcastle. Then later this week, we're going to Nottingham and Sheffield and Manchester. Then we're going to Southampton. Then we're going to Plymouth. Then we're going to Truro. Then we're going back to Scotland. Then we've got another event in London. Do you want the entire list? But it's there, and the atmosphere is the same in all of them. There's this incredible feeling of optimism, of hope, and of unity, and of achieving something together. It's not about abuse, it's not about name-calling, it's about ideas, and it's about opening up that space for all of us to contribute to creating the kind of society and world that we want to live in. When you work together, when you're democratic, when you're open, when you're inclusive, it makes for a great feeling. Thank you very much, Middlesbrough.
Jeremy,
The result all round.
Northern Powerhouse in a nutshell, what do you think?
Be careful of Tories bringing gifts that are cleverly wrapped, because inside you might find a big bill.